Dusk settled over the park pavilion like a soft cloth. Nori stepped inside and paused just long enough to feel the cool of the evening on bare wrists. The side doors stood half-closed. With both hands Nori eased them wider until the air moved freely through the workshop, carrying the faint green scent of grass and the deeper quiet of trees. An oil lamp waited on the workbench. Nori trimmed the wick, struck a match, and watched the flame catch. For a moment it wavered, then found its slow sway, a single soft tongue of light that leaned and righted itself without hurry. The glow spread across scattered wood shavings, turning them the color of pale honey. Nori chose a flank that still held the rough memory of a chisel. The sandpaper whispered. Fine dust rose and settled again. Linseed oil waited in a small tin nearby, its warm, nutty smell mixing with the cooler breath from the open doors. Each stroke followed the grain. There was no need to press hard. The wood answered by growing smoother under the palm. Around the carousel ring the half-restored animals stood in their patient places. A pale stallion faced the far corner where spare poles leaned against the wall. A spotted pony angled toward the shelves of paint jars. A small goat seemed to listen toward the open doors themselves. None of them moved, yet each held a quiet preference, as if the room itself had directions worth noticing. The painted mare stood nearest the ticket booth. Her coat was already smooth in places, the color of soft twilight blue with a manner the shade of dried lavender. Whenever the oil lamp flame swayed and the shadows shifted, her head appeared a little more turned. The empty booth waited beyond her, its window dark, its counter bare. Nori sanded another careful pass and looked again. The tilt remained. A small crack near the mare's shoulder needed filling. Nori mixed a pinch of fine sawdust with a drop of glue, pressed it gently into the seam, and held a clean cloth against it until the surface felt even. The repair was modest. When the cloth came away, the wood looked almost whole again. Nori set the tools aside and wiped both hands on a soft rag until no grit remained. The broom waited by the wall. Nori took it and began a slow circuit of the ring, gathering shavings into a quiet path that curved between the animal's hooves. The bristles made a sound like dry leaves brushed by a sleeve. Cool air from the doors stirred the finer dust and carried it out into the dusk. The oil lamp flame continued its unhurried sway, casting long gentle shapes that moved and settled as Nori passed. When the floor felt clear enough, Nori returned the broom to its place and washed hands in the basin by the bench. The water was cool. Soap smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. After drying, the skin felt clean and smooth, ready for rest rather than more work. A low stool stood near the center of the ring. Nori Saturday. The pavilion held its evening hush, the soft creak of old beams, the distant hush of leaves outside, the nearly silent breathing of the lamp. Across the quiet space the painted mare kept her angle toward the empty booth. The question of that tilt remained open, unanswered, resting lightly in the still air like a leaf that has not yet decided to fall. Nori watched the mare in the steady glow. The slow sway of the single oil lamp flame painted the edges of her wooden manere with gold and then with shadow. Nothing needed solving before morning. The open doors let the cool night deepen. The animals waited in their chosen directions. Hands clean and still, Nori simply sat, letting the pavilion's calm gather around the unfinished circle and the quiet tilt that would wait until another hour. After a long while of simply sitting, Nori remembered the fine brush. It had gone missing sometime near dusk, the slender one used for the thin lines along a manere or the soft curve of an eye. The work table held only the broader brushes and a small jar of linseed that caught the lamp's glow. Nori rose without hurry and crossed the ring toward the empty ticket booth, feet quiet on the swept boards. The booth stood half in shadow. Its little window looked out over the pavilion floor, and its counter held a thin film of dust that the evening air had not yet stirred. Nori ran a careful hand along the shelf beneath the counter, feeling for the brush's smooth handle. Wood met fingertips, cool and familiar. Then something shifted under a light press, not the brush, but a panel that gave a soft, dry click and eased inward by the width of a thumb. Nori paused. The slow sway of a single oil lamp flame reached even here, painting a thin edge of gold along the panel's seam and then letting it fade to shadow again. With both hands Nori eased the panel farther. Behind it waited a narrow stair that turned once and sank into a cooler dark, smelling faintly of old cedar and settled air. One step at a time, Nori went down. The walls of the stair were plain and close. At the bottom the space opened into a ring of small storerooms linked by low archways, each room holding its own quiet share of unfinished work. Wooden animals waited there without paint, their shapes only half risen from the grain. A horse stood with one leg still rough. A swan held a neck that had not yet been sanded smooth. Smaller pieces lay on shelves, ears, hooves, a curling tail, none of them named, all of them patient. In the farthest room a low bench held a thin ledger bound in faded cloth. Nori lifted it gently. The pages inside carried only pencil marks, small and careful, the kind a child might make when learning to keep pace with an older hand. Names of animals appeared in neat rows beside notes about tunes and the places where a melody might rest inside the wood. Some lines trailed off unfinished. A few pages held only a date and a single soft word. Beside the ledger lay a small wooden scrap no larger than a palm, its surface already smoothed on one side and left rough on the other. Nori took both, the ledger and the scrap, and climbed the narrow stair again. Cool air from the storerooms followed a little way and then thinned into the warmer quiet of the workshop above. Back in the lamplight, Nori set the wooden scrap on the work table and opened the ledger once more. The pencil lines looked pale against the paper. Across the ring the painted mare kept her steady angle toward the ticket booth, as if she had known the panel was loose all along. Nori closed the ledger and placed it beside the lamp where the light could rest on its cover without hurry. The stair remained open behind the panel, a dark soft mouth into the rooms below. Nothing pressed for more work tonight. Nori sat again on the low stool, hands quiet, and let the pavilion gather its evening hush once more. The unfinished animals waited below. The half-restored ones waited above. Between them the ledger lay closed, and the cool night deepened through the open side doors while the lamp flame swayed slow and even, keeping its gentle watch. Nori rose from the low stool after a long still moment and walked once more to the open side doors. The evening air had grown cooler and carried the faint green scent of cut grass from the park beyond. For a while Nori simply stood there, letting the quiet settle into the shoulders and the wrists, before turning back to the half-restored ring. The undercoat on the nearest horse had dried to a soft matte finish. Nori chose a fine grade of sandpaper and began to smooth the flank in slow, even strokes. Wood dust rose in a pale cloud that smelled clean and dry. When the surface felt ready beneath the palm, Nori set the paper aside and sat close on the stool, near enough that a knee almost touched the carved leg. In that nearness a small phrase rose, no louder than breath. It was a skipping rhythm, light and quick, like pebbles tapped one after another along a path. Nori listened without reaching for it, only letting the pattern settle into memory the way a color might settle onto a brush. After a time the phrase quieted of its own accord, and Nori rose to mix a thin wash of soft cream paint for the next coat. Across the ring a second animal waited, a taller horse whose neck still showed the pale grain of unfinished wood. Nori carried the lamp a little nearer so that its single flame swayed slow and even above the work. The same careful sanding followed, then the same patient sitting. This time the sound that came was a long low hum, steady as a distant cartwheel turning on a quiet road. It filled the chest rather than the ear. Nori noted it gently, without naming it aloud, and left a soft mark in the margin of a scrap of paper so the tune would not drift away. A third animal, smaller and painted in faded blue, offered almost nothing at first. Nori sanded the curve of its shoulder until the wood felt warm and smooth, then waited longer than before. Cool air drifted in from the doors and stirred the shavings on the floor. At last a brief rising phrase appeared, no more than 3 soft notes that seemed to lift and settle like a moth. Nori held them carefully and moved on. The painted mare remained at her place in the circle, head still angled toward the empty ticket booth. Nori passed her once, twice, without beginning work there. The sense had grown clear that listening belonged to the mending, and that the mare's turn would come only when more of the ring had been gathered into quiet readiness. The ledger lay closed beside the lamp, its pencil pages waiting without urgency. Nori returned to the cream-washed horse and laid on the thin coat with long, unhurried strokes. The brush whispered against the wood. When the paint tin was empty enough, Nori wiped the rim clean, pressed the lid down until it seated with a soft click, and set the tin aside. No tune was hummed aloud yet. The gathered phrases simply rested in the mind, the skipping rhythm, the long low hum, the 3 rising notes, held as lightly as the scent of linseed that still hung in the air. Outside the open doors the park had grown fully dark. Inside, the lamp flame continued its slow sway, casting a gentle gold across the wood shavings and the quiet animals. Nori sat once more on the low stool, hands folded, and let the evening hush deepen around the half-finished circle. The unfinished ones waited below. The mended ones waited above. Between them the small collected tunes kept their soft places, ready for whatever patient work the next dusk might bring. When the next dusk settled over the park, Nori returned to the pavilion and found the side doors still open to the cool air. The oil lamp waited on its hook. Nori lit the wick with a slow match and watched the flame catch, then settle into its familiar gentle motion. Soft gold spilled once more across the ring of animals and the scatter of shavings on the floorboards. One horse that had received its thin coat the evening before now stood dull beneath the light. The fresh colors had lost their quiet brightness overnight. The red along the saddle skirt looked muted, and the cream of the Mare had gone flat, as if the wood had simply drunk the paint too deep and left nothing shining on the surface. Nori did not reach for the scraper. There was no hurry and no sharp edge to the disappointment. Instead, Nori rested a palm lightly against the horse's neck, feeling the cool grain, and stood a while in the hush. The mare nearby kept her steady angle toward the empty ticket booth, head tilted just as before. The other animals held their own soft leans. Only this one horse needed a different kind of care. Nori stepped out through the open doors and onto the path that curved away from the pavilion. The evening air smelled of damp earth and the faint sweetness of leaves that had held the afternoon's rain. Gravel whispered under slow footsteps. Beyond the first turn of the path the trees leaned close, their broad leaves hanging heavy and still. Nori walked without rush, pausing now and then to lift a hand to the foliage. Some leaves were already dry. Others held only tiny beads that rolled away at the lightest touch. Farther along, where the branches arched lower, one leaf spread wider than the rest, its surface cupped like a shallow green bowl. Rain still rested there in a clear, quiet pool. Nori cupped both hands beneath the leaf and tilted it with care. The water ran cool across the palms and into a small glass jar brought from the workshop shelf. A few drops clung to the leaf's veins and then followed. When the jar held enough, Nori straightened, felt the cool weight of it, and turned back along the path. The park remained hushed. No bird called. Only the soft press of feet on gravel marked the return. Inside the pavilion again, the lamp flame continued its slow sway, throwing gentle gold across the waiting horse and the open paint tins. Nori set the jar on the workbench, dipped a clean brush into the leaf water, and stirred a little into the red pigment. The color thinned without losing its depth. Another soft stir into the cream. The mixture felt right under the bristles, smooth, ready, and patient. With long, unhurried strokes, Nori laid the new coat over the dulled places. The brush whispered. The paint went on true, holding its quiet brightness even as it settled into the grain. Under the swaying lamp, the red deepened along the saddle skirt, and the cream of the Mare caught the soft gold without fading. Nori worked until the last thin place had been covered, then stepped back to look. The horse stood steady now. Its colors held. The air smelled once more of linseed and clean wood. Nori rinsed the jar at the small basin, dried it with a soft cloth, and returned it to its place on the shelf beside the other quiet tools. The mare still angled toward the ticket booth, her painted eye calm, the unanswered tilt remaining as gentle as ever. Nori cleaned each brush in turn, working the pigment from the bristles until the water ran clear. The floorboards had grown cool underfoot from the night air drifting through the open doors. When the brushes were set to dry, Nori drew the low stool close to the true-colored horse and Saturday. Hands rested lightly on the knees. The lamp flame swayed once more in its slow, familiar arc. Around them the half-finished circle kept its hush, and the evening deepened without haste. Nori sat a little longer with the true-colored horse, then rose and crossed to the low work table where the thin ledger waited beneath a folded cloth. The pencil marks inside had been left for another evening. Now the evening had come. Nori drew the stool nearer the lamp and opened the cover with both hands. The pages smelled faintly of old paper and dry cedar. Each sheet held a small sketch of a hoof or a Mare, and beside every drawing a name written only in pencil, the letters careful and slight, as if a child's hand had pressed them there without hurry. One name sat next to a curling forelock. Another rested beside a quiet curve of neck. Nori turned the leaves slowly, reading each line by the warm circle of light. The lamp flame swayed in its slow, familiar arc, and the shadows of the pencil strokes leaned and settled again. When the last page had been seen, Nori closed the ledger gently and carried it toward the ticket booth. The loose panel opened without sound. Cool air rose from the narrow stair. Nori stepped down into the ring of storerooms where the unfinished wooden animals waited in their soft dust. There they stood in quiet rows, forms without paint, manes still rough, eyes not yet bright. Nori walked among them with the ledger open once more, matching the pencil names to the shapes that had never reached the circle above. A small wooden scrap from an earlier visit rested on a shelf. Nori set the ledger beside it and rested a palm on the nearest unfinished flank. The wood felt smooth in places and unfinished in others, patient under the touch. A thought settled then, as quiet as the dust. The mare upstairs had never angled toward a music box tune. She had listened for the soft pace of the builder's child, the one who once walked these rooms naming what was still to come. The finished melody was never meant to live only inside a metal drum. It was meant to be hummed by whoever painted the last quiet horse with care rather than hurry. Nori carried the ledger back up into the workshop light and crossed the ring to the painted mare. Her head still tilted toward the empty booth, her painted eye calm. Nori stood close and spoke the understanding in a voice no louder than breath. The tilt no longer asked a question. It simply waited, the way a friend waits at a doorway. From the storeroom below, Nori chose one unfinished form, the last horse, smaller than the others, its grain clean and pale. Nori brought it up into the lamplight and set it on the low workbench near the open doors. Evening air moved softly across the wood. Nori took the finest sandpaper and began to work in long, unhurried strokes, following the natural curve of shoulder and flank. Wood dust gathered like pale flour on the floorboards. The scent of clean grain mixed with linseed still lingering from the earlier coat. Nori sanded until the surface felt even beneath the fingertips, then paused to brush the dust away with a soft cloth. The circle above had been left open on purpose. A patient hand was always part of the plan. Nori sanded a little more, then a little less, until the last horse stood nearly ready, smooth, waiting only for undercoat and the quiet colors that would follow on another night. The ledger lay closed on the work table. Its pencil names had done their work. Nori stepped back and looked from the nearly ready horse to the painted mare. Her head angled still, yet the angle no longer held a riddle. It held a welcome, soft as the dusk air through the open doors. Nori drew the low stool close once more and sat between them, hands resting lightly, the workshop hush deepening around the three of them without haste. Nori rose from the low stool without hurry and reached for the jar of undercoat. The nearly ready horse waited with its grain already smooth. Soft bristles touched the wood in long, even strokes. The paint smelled faintly of linseed and clean water. Each pass covered a little more of the pale surface until the form looked calm and ready for color. The oil lamp hung nearby. Its single flame gave a slow sway that moved light gently across the wet undercoat. Nori waited for the first layer to settle, listening to the cool air that drifted through the open side doors. Outside, the park held only the soft hush of evening leaves. When the undercoat had dried enough to accept more, Nori mixed the quiet colors drawn from the ledger's old notes and from memory of the other animals. A soft bay brown for the body. A deeper shade along the mare. A pale cream for the hooves that would rest on the wooden ring. The brush moved slowly. Paint caught the lamplight and grew richer as it thinned and evened. While the colors went on, Nori began to hum. The sound rose low at first, almost a breath. It gathered the skipping rhythm from one restored horse, the long low hum from another, the small phrases noted over earlier nights. The melody joined itself without force. It filled the space between the last horse and the painted mare. The mare's head remained angled, not in question now but in quiet company. Nori hummed through the final coat, pausing only to wipe the brush and thin a drop of pigment. The last horse took on its finished look under those careful hands. Eyes were painted last, soft and open, the same patient brown used on the others. When the brush was set aside, the animal stood complete. Paint still glistened faintly in places that would dry by morning. Nori carried the horse to the open place on the ring. The wood of the platform felt cool and steady underfoot. With both hands Nori set the new animal onto its pole, turning it a little until it faced the same gentle curve as its neighbors. The painted mare watched from her place. Around the circle the half-restored and fully mended animals rested in their varied leans, no longer pulling toward separate corners. Nori stepped back to the center and laid one palm lightly on the nearest polished rail. The carousel answered with the smallest shift. Under the gentle weight of the finished circle, it began one slow test turn. Floorboards murmured. Poles moved past the open doors in an easy arc. Cool evening air brushed each painted flank in turn. No music box sounded. Only the soft roll of the mechanism and the quiet hum that still lingered in Nori's throat. The turn completed itself and settled. Everything grew still again. The animals stood as if they had finally heard what they had been waiting for. The mare's angle now seemed only restful, part of the finished ring rather than a question left open. Nori cleaned every tool. Brushes were rinsed until the water ran clear, then laid flat to dry. Jars were capped and returned to their shelf. The ledger was placed in the drawer beneath the work table, its pencil names no longer needed for the night. Wood shavings were swept into a neat pile and carried to the small bin by the wall. The cloths were folded. Nothing was left scattered. One by one the brighter lamps were lowered until only the single oil lamp remained. Its flame kept the same slow sway, smaller now, painting a dim gold circle on the floorboards. Nori left the side doors open so the cool air could still pass through. No latch closed harshly. The pavilion breathed with the dusk. Nori sat once more on the low stool, hands resting lightly on the knees. Around the ring the animals kept their quiet places. Paint dried unseen. Wood held its warmth from the day's work. The last melody rested in the grain and in the air alike, no longer needing to be hummed aloud. Only the dimmest lamp remains, its flame barely swaying, while Nori's breathing matches the quiet of finished wood. The story has come to rest, and so may you.